Hi, S'bu. How are you?
I'm well, I'm very well, Sid. I hope you are well.
Yeah, man, I'm well on this overcast day in Durban, and it's my pleasure to be talking to you today. So my opening question to you is, right, tell me about your journey to becoming an author and a speaker.
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you very much for having me, and to share, my, journey as an author.
Mhm.
Look, I started my very first book as an author was in 2016, and that is when I launched my very first book, titled "Yesterday I Cried." Which is a book that I think really, I think it really truly inspired me to write many other books because of the success that we had with Yesterday I Cried. And this is really a book about finding hope in shattered pieces of your life, and it also helps you. And oftentimes, we get fixated in our experiences. Now I try and bring perspective, new perspective to your experiences that makes you see them as God that ordained and linked to your purpose in life overall. So it's really a book that is really about inspiring people and changing your perspectives, basically about your experiences. And then after that book, I then launched the next one, which is We Are All Here. And I think this was really largely based on the testimonies that I was receiving from people who were sharing their experiences. Having read Yesterday I Cried, it actually made me to realize that each person is really, there's one or two issues that each person is contending with, meaning that we all have experiences that we can relate to, and hence I termed it, We Are All Here. After that, I then launched my third book, which is Unbridled to Conquer the World. It's really about, helping people get out of the prison of mental illness. Mental illness is one condition that is really prevalent in society. So it's really a book about trying to help people rescue them and help them become the best version of themselves, and to shed off the victim mentality and see, so that they really become the best of what God had ordained about their lives. After that, I then launched the one of the most popular books as well, which is Drenched in the Name of Love, and you'll understand why it turned out to be popular, especially because of the many struggles that people have. If there's one thing that tends really to bring a lot of mental issues in our lives, is in the area of relationships. And this is where you find ourselves grappling with a whole lot of mental issues, and the book comes to really try and help people escape from that prison, where you escape even from your experiences, because if those experiences are not dealt with, they really become skeletons that begin to sabotage us even for other relationships. So it helps you not to immortalize your experiences and your pain. So it sets you free with the perspective that we sort of shared there. After that, I then launched the book Disruption. Disruption was largely informed by the experiences, especially around COVID-19 and how it brought disruption. But I then relate to how many other things that really bring disruption in our lives, and but how, as much as disruption can come with inconvenience, but how it can really tend to be a blessing, in that it helps you to relaunch yourselves. I mean, there are people that just because they were retrenched from their employment, but that retrenchment became a blessing in that it helped them to maybe launch an idea or a business idea. So disruptions on their own are not necessarily bad. So I try to explain and to come with perspectives that help you in that regard. And then my very last offering is I found me whilst chasing after lost donkeys. I really just use lost donkeys as a metaphor of the things that, and often we find ourselves chasing after things, and we bemoan the fact that we don't have this, we don't have that, only to find that we miss the real thing. And that is, so the books helps you to say, look, yes, those things are important, but what is more important is your true identity. And often, with the things that we chase, you find that we miss chasing after our true identity. Now, so that was my last book that I launched was in 2024. I'm just sharing my journey as an author, and I think through that, I must say that I've really been encouraged with the feedback that I've been receiving. People, it actually meant for me receiving an award. For instance, in 2021, I received my very first award, as a best male author in the Book Behind Awards event, which was held in Durban. And in 2022, I received another award, of because of the book Drenched in the Name of Love. It won an award again in the Some Awards, the Book Behind Awards, as the best healing book. And very recently, in fact, almost a week ago, in Johannesburg, I was actually up, I received an award as one of the icons of Africa. It was a very, very fulfilling and a humbling experience, to be recognized amongst many distinguished, individuals, not just in South Africa, but in the continent. So it really inspired me to continue writing as an author. So in short, this has really been my journey as an author.
What about your journey to speaker as well?
Yes, in the process, that has actually, my writing has opened doors for me to speak in different audiences. I speak mostly because most of my books are about healing, and restoration, and because of that, I've had to be invited in various audiences, which I've really enjoyed myself. The very recent engagement I had was in an event called Heart to Heart, healing event, where I shared, platforms with some of the great speakers. And I think this is what, book writing has done for me, which I appreciate, is that the opening of those platforms where I speak to people I've never have spoken to. And that has really been very rewarding, because I've had not just to speak, but also to be able to, respond to questions and give different perspectives. So it has really been fulfilling, journey for me.
All right. What inspires you to write books?
Well, firstly, I think since I was young, I've always, had that, inclination to write my reflections down, even before the days of social media and stuff like that. I'm a very analytical person, so. And I always like to write things down as I see them, perspectives. But I don't allow an experience to go to waste. Every experience, even personal experiences, I often reflect after each experience to say, what lesson can I write out of this experience? And so you find that at home, before I even launched my very first book, there were piles of notes that I was always writing, until there was an experience that really pushed me. And this is where I was really, struggling with a condition, a health condition that the doctors couldn't really, diagnose. And yet it continued to trouble me, to the extent that, and I think that experience, there and then I had to, at some point, reach a point of having to choose between surrendering to hopelessness and maybe writing down my experience and what it means for me, and maybe encourage others who may be going through the same. That was the birth of my first book in 2026. So I'm really inspired by the stories, firstly in my own life, my own experiences, but also I'm really inspired by the resilience of human beings, and therefore the different experiences of other people often inspire me a lot. And there are many people that I can think of, and I look at their lives. I'm as an observant person, so I observe how, for instance, they reacted to a particular condition, situation, and that really tends to inform my perspectives. And this is how most of my books are born. But also, I really like to see people's lives being changed, and that really inspires me. I like to live an impact. I love to see people becoming the best version of themselves. So I think that passion of wanting to make an impact in people's lives, of really seeing them change, from where they were, to be the best version of themselves, adds to this inspiration.
What have been your highlights thus far?
Well, I think for me, firstly, it's really the reception of my very first book, by and remember that it was a book that is I was unknown that introduced me to the world. The feedback that I got out of the very first book, Yesterday I Cried, I must say that it's been one of my highlights. Um, and then the subsequent feedback from all the other books that I've written, it's really been one of my highlights. And I think to see people's lives being changed just because they read my books, you have no idea of the impact and the profound fulfillment that it brings. I've had, for instance, there was a lady who actually, read Yesterday I Cried. So, and she was sharing with me that her granny, who was over 90 years old, is now hawking the book, and he said, "No, get another. Now you order another one because this one is mine." And I think for me that has really been fulfilling. I've had a widow who lost her husband, and she used to share with me, that she used to cry all night long but until she read Yesterday I Cried, because there is a popular chapter in Yesterday I Cried, which is about finding closure and moving on. It's a favorite chapter for most people. It's that chapter. So I've had someone on the verge of committing suicide who then wrote my. So I'm therefore who read my book. I'm therefore saying that all of those things have been my major highlights. But obviously, having my work recognized in the 3 awards that I've just shared with you, has been my highlights. But also, just connecting with individuals I will never have reached out to. I don't know how many people, often reach out to me, and sometimes I bump to people as I travel at the airports, and they say, "Hey, continue writing. I am reading your books," and that for me, I say I would never have known those people. I would never have been connected. But also connecting with other authors as well. I've met with many other authors in different occasions and different events that I would not have otherwise if I wasn't introduced to the world of writing. So I think for me, those really have been my highlights in the main.
Any lowlights?
Well, there have been lowlights. I think lowlights such as sometimes self-doubt. And I've observed that sometimes the message that you write and you preach about, sometimes they come back to test you. As you can imagine, I did say to you that most of my books are about encouragement, about healing, about restoration. So there are times when the messages come and they test me if I can actually practice what I preach when I'm facing moments of discouragement and all of that. So those moments do come, but often I have to encourage myself with the very messages that I've written. I don't know how many times I've had to go back to the book Yesterday I Cried, and I think that book remains a very source of encouragement for me. I've gone to it several times. I keep it with me. So there are times where I've got to go back and say, okay, what did I say? And I become encouraged. But also, I think sometimes I get sad that I often believe that which each of us as individuals, I always say that with what you are capable of, most of us have not even come to 50% of delivering in terms of our capacity and what God has deposited in us. We haven't. We have only scratched the surface if you look at our capabilities and what we are capable of doing. But because of many reasons, maybe because of self-doubt, we really never get to rise to be a level, of what God has placed us. But also with me, it's also about time between juggling because I'm also employed full time. So juggling between that and writing has really been one of the things that have really been my low lights, I must say. But also, I think my schedule and my unavailability, I like mentoring people, I like developing people. And sometimes the fact that people reach out to me and I can't help them, I can't be with them and I can't. So it's really been one of really my low lights in that, hey, I wish I could have done so much. I wish I could have written more books. Could have helped more people, mentor more authors, upcoming authors. And I think those have really been my low lights.
What are your plans for next year and beyond?
Well, for next year, There's a book that I'm busy cooking behind the scenes, and it's really a book mostly around mentor. Mentoring, a boy child, or let me just say males, and speaking to men, you know, because I often think that which is what I like a lot. We invest a lot in a girl child, and I think we've really ignored to an extent the boy child. And I really think that most boy, children and men in general are looking up to mentors, role models, and I don't think that and I think we do have a phenomenon of most of our children growing without fathers, and they miss that those you do miss those lessons from a father, not even a biological father but a father figure. So and therefore there's a message that I've been working behind the scenes. I'm hoping to launch it in going to 2026. But I also want to spread my voice as well and reach out to even to greater audience. The fact that I like to go in the continent in Africa, I like to make strides there and to have my books read in most of the. I think that God has been good to me. I've really been able to make significant inroads in South Africa. Although there's still a wide audience still to cover. But if you look at when I first when I first wrote my very first book, to now, I really think that I've covered some ground. But now I really want to spread my wings and look at the other countries in the continent. So those and of course even spread my influence in other mediums, in the social media space and so on. So those are my plans for 2026, and of course launch even more books, because I plan that after the book on men, I really want to also, there's a book that I'm also behind the scenes preparing now, talking to a girl child. So those are the things that I'll be busy with in 2026.
And finally, what are your words of inspiration for upcoming authors and speakers?
Well, I think I'll say to them, stay true to your voice and your message. Tell your story in the most unique way that you can. Don't try and be someone else and imitate other people, because other people like really to, you'll make greater influence if you stay true to yourself. But also, I often say, people often ask me, you are so busy, when do you get time to write? And I said to them, there are never perfect conditions. Perfect conditions never arise. You make do with what you have where you are at that time that you are in. So most of my books are written when I'm either waiting, if I have a doctor's appointment, if I'm waiting there, that's where my books are written. My books are written whilst I'm standing in the queue, wherever my books are written whilst I'm at the airport, sitting down, waiting for the next flight. That's how my books are written. I don't wait for a perfect moment. Do with the time that you have. Don't spend time and don't be in the habit of being idle. If there is a moment, except when you are resting, of course, but if there is a moment, capture that moment and try and look for inspiration within. But also, lastly, don't wait for validation from others. One of the things that have made me to continue writing, I'm not really influenced so much by other people. As long as it's not so much about how other people believe in you and in your message, but it's about how much do you believe in it yourself. It's that self-belief that will give it currency for it to thrive. So I don't, as long as I believe I have a message, I go on with it without really having to rely on validation, because that really often does not take you anywhere.
All right.
Yeah.
All I gotta say, thanks so much for your time, and catch up with you soon in the future.
Thank you so much, Sid. And again, thank you for having me. I enjoyed this interview. Thank you so very much.
Welcome.
Thank you.